I was expecting a jingle there, but we didn't get one. Even better, though, we've got Nick Eardley, our political correspondent.
I'll do your
Hello,
jingle.
Nick.
Morning.
Nick Eardley, that's the one. Listen, this is Jess Phillips being accused of lying, which she denies. She says she's been a straight talker. The survivors on the survivors panel are not best pleased. We're discussing it this morning. Incredible call from Ali, not real name, just before the news. The government didn't want this inquiry in the first place, did they? Is it right to say, or is it a fair accusation to say they were dragged into a position to have it?
No, I don't think that is unfair, actually. There was a lot of pressure put on the government earlier this year. It wasn't something they came out the traps to do immediately. And when Keir Starmer announced it back in June, I think on the whole, there was a sense that this was something the government had been, if not necessarily forced, then certainly pushed in the direction of. So no, I don't think that's unfair. I think that's a fair way to see it.
Mm-hmm. Why did they turn about on this then?
Well, there was considerable pressure. I mean, you might remember that this issue of grooming gangs has been in the media and public discourse on social media for years now. And the question was always, had enough been done to look at the race and ethnicity of the perpetrators of some of these crimes? And the survivors have always argued that the answer was no, that sometimes political correctness meant that some people were a bit reluctant to look into this in full detail. And I think there was a bit of a reluctance politically to get into some of those finer details. But the honest answer is the pressure over this kept coming. The survivors wanted it to happen. And in the end, I think the government realised that there was an issue here and one that they would have to look into. So that's why they're, I suspect, extremely worried about the situation they have just now, where four of the people who were brought on to the advisory panel to figure out how this inquiry should work are now saying we don't have faith in it and we're not going to take part in it anymore. That's a big problem for the government.
And because we necessarily and quite properly have to privilege survivors because they are the ones who've been through it, do we then extend to that the right of survivors to choose the chair?
It's a good question. I think the view in government would be that it's slightly more complicated than that, in the sense that they need to feel that they're getting someone with enough expertise on the issue who can handle it sensitively enough to come to some sort of meaningful conclusion. I think the way that's maybe slightly better at looking at it is it needs to be somebody that has the backing of survivors. Otherwise, you just end up with a system. If the people who were impacted by this are saying, well, look, we don't trust this, and then there's a long inquiry, it feels like a bit of a waste of time, doesn't it? You certainly need to have survivors on board saying this is something they think, one, that they can engage with in the first place, and two, that they can feel like they trust when it comes up with conclusions about what went wrong and what could be done differently in the future.
Okay, thanks, Nick. One more, actually, something else that's coming up, and it doesn't not relate to the appalling phenomenon of sexual exploitation, the Epstein affair, which is casting such a long, dark shadow over public life in this country. Prince Andrew vigorously denies all the allegations, but we have the whole issue about his stipend, about his titles, about the place where he lives, the Royal Lodge, very grand place. It looks like, blimey, looking at pictures of it, top-end wedding venue. So there's a growing head of steam to actually hammer him, isn't there, politically?
There is. I think on the issue of titles, I suspect that not much more will happen unless there's other revelations that take this into a whole new dimension. But on the issue of the Royal Lodge and the fact that Prince Andrew isn't paying any money, it seems, for regular rent on that property, I think is going to continue to cause problems for the royal family. I think there are an increasing number of politicians who want to be seen to do something on this issue. So it wouldn't surprise me if it keeps coming up over the next few days. That said, Nicky, I'm not necessarily saying that something will happen, because I think the government is very reluctant to get into the space of being seen to sanction one
Robert
of the
Jenrick's
royals.
got stuck in, hasn't he, from the
He
Tories?
did, yeah. I mean, he said a lot yesterday about Prince Andrew and suggesting that he shouldn't be living in Royal Lodge, and that, you know, that he should kind of remove himself from public life altogether. I do think, though, what matters here is the government, right? Because the government have the ability to bring this to Parliament. They have the ability, with their cracking majority, to do something about this. As I say, I think they're really reluctant to do it unless the King and the royal family come forward and say, actually, we think you should do this. So I think the pressure is going to continue. That pressure could, in the end, force the government to do something, I suppose. But at the moment, I'm not certain that that will happen.
Thanks, Nick. Nick Eardley there, our political correspondent. Back to the inquiry here. Who will chair it? Do you have faith in the grooming gang inquiry? Guy in Bognor Regis, David Greenwood, child abuse lawyer as well. Hi, David. Guy, you go first. What do you think?
I just think that I just think the NSPCC should be running the inquiry.
Tell me more.
Because we've already got a national society for the prevention of cruelty to children. These girls that were abused were children. The NSPCC have legal representation. They're a large, well-financed body. I used to collect for them when I was at school. Surely they should be running it.
What if they have a kind of groupthink? Not saying they do, I'm just putting this out there. They have a kind of groupthink which would steer clear of any issues of race or ethnicity or culture. They would feel extremely uncomfortable tackling and addressing those.
Are you asking me?
I'm just putting it out there. Is that not a fear? Potentially? Possibly?
I think this should be led by the victims. It should be all centred around the victims and not worried about what the Pakistani society think, not worried about what the government thinks. It should be all about the victims. And currently it isn't.
Which is clearly what the victims are saying. Thanks, Guy. David Greenwood, it needs to be victim-centred. How do we do that?
Okay, so the victims deserve massive respect, and they need to have confidence in the thing. If we're going to spend more than £100 million on an inquiry like this, then it's going to come up with recommendations. On past experience, governments haven't even implemented recommendations. We know from Professor Jay's inquiry that those recommendations haven't been brought into force yet. So if this is not going to be wasted money, then we need survivors of this appalling crime to be not influencing it, but having a serious input into who chairs it, so that it has survivors' confidence.
But
otherwise, it's going to come up with recommendations.
Absolutely. But you say not influence. Sorry, not deciding upon it, but influence. Sorry, you said not influencing it. So, but if they have a say, they're always going to influence it.
Yeah, if they have a say in the direction of the, they can input their knowledge of how these grooming gangs have operated, and that will inform the people who are trawling through the evidence from local authorities and police forces around the country, and they'll be able to steer them in the right direction and make sure that they're looking into the right pieces of evidence and various behaviours of these perpetrators, behaviours of council workers and police forces, and even NHS.
But ultimately, I say, okay, person's going to be the chair, and they can ultimately say, we're not having her, or this person, we're not having him. How do you break that impasse?
Okay, yeah. So I think we faced this in the. Do you remember the Grenfell inquiry and the furore that surrounded the potential appointment of chairs for that? What happened there was that very senior judge, who was pretty much beyond reproach, was selected, and he wasn't just parachuted in. What he did was built confidence by having a series of public meetings, and he answered openly in a big room all the questions that the survivors' families wanted answering about his approach to things. I think that's the way to do it, because otherwise confidence is not going to be there. If it's a person that applies for the job or is shortlisted for the job by a government department, that's no good. Oh, it really has to be in my opinion, a high-level judge or retired judge who is used to assessing evidence and weighing it up impartially.
Yeah, I mean, you worked on, as a lawyer, Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford and Manchester. Anyone who's read court reports, it's just unspeakable what happened to these girls.
Yeah, and it's judges, it's judges fair. It's what they do all day. They are impartial, so they will just look at the evidence, and they will draw conclusions from it, and the evidence will be. It's a really complicated process. It's an inquiry, isn't it? It's a matter of going out there, working out what evidence is available, bringing it in, and bringing the most relevant stuff in to demonstrate the points.
Thank you.
That's what Paul, an army of lawyers do behind the scenes.
David Greenwood, thank you. Paul on the Wirral, thank you for getting in touch. As a survivor yourself, what do you make of what's going on?
I haven't been listening to all of your show, Nicky, but I've been listening to some of the points David made. I've looked in the faces of my three abusers. It's a scourge on the human race, childhood sexual abuse. And the person, I think, you don't survive childhood sexual abuse, but the person that coined the phrase was, as they described themselves as a survivor. You don't survive it. It's with you. There's no closure. There's no justice at all in the whole of your life. It impacts on every part of your life. It never goes away. We should be, what I think is somebody who's been sexually abused should be the chair. So they'll go, obviously, with the knowledge within the law as a judge. You can't be impartial to this, because people are now, the perpetrators and the awful criminals are being prosecuted. Greater Manchester Police has apologised so late, too late, and has made our lives. I'm not in part of that. I was abused in childhood, growing up. One of my former psychiatrists, looking at my records, actually wrote in my records in black and white that I allowed myself to abuse for sex for money by a paedophile at 14 years old. I didn't. And we're here